Hi everyone, my name is Amy Kennedy and I'm a ceramic artist from Melbourne, Australia. And I have the pleasure today to be having a conversation with Greg Daly, who is a ceramic artist coming from his studio in Cowra in New South Wales. For many of you, you will not need an introduction to Greg Daly. For those of you that are new to him, you're in for a treat. And I really encourage you to look into some of the resources and get into the world of Greg Daly after that you've listened to this recording. I am very excited to be having this conversation, as I just said, and I wanted to do a brief intro to Greg. It will in no way encapsulate, the breadth of your life work, Greg, but I wanted to sort of put you in a context for people that may be new to you. So you specialize, I'll tell you what you do. You specialize in a combination of extraordinary form and extraordinary glaze effects. Particularly luster glazes in these more recent years. You have had over 105 solo exhibitions, most recently a beautiful exhibition at Sabia Gallery, which I viewed online, called Alchemy and Light, and I think you'll probably be able to still view that online. Your work is represented in over 90 national and international museums and art galleries, including the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. You are a member of the International Academy of Ceramics, and this has been since 1986. The author of 3 books on glazes. I've got 2 of them here, and we're going to mention them at the end. And you've been featured in many publications in Australia and internationally. You are a highly respected teacher, and you've taught at the Australian National University for many years. The last 3 years, you were the head of department there. And you are a keen collector of ceramics, your own ceramics and other people's ceramics too. So welcome today. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Amy. I'm glad to be here. It's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah, thank you. And really, I think, talking with Greg Daly, you could talk about many, many different things, couldn't you? Many different topics, technical, exhibitions, the whole gamut. But as I was saying to you when I emailed you 3 weeks or so ago, I was really inspired to have this conversation because of a conversation that we had late last year. I was in the midst of running my writing program, Fresh Eyes, which in a nutshell is about using writing as a practical tool to develop your work, move it forward, gain perspective, interrogate it, set your own standards to move your work forward. And as I was telling you about it, you were really interested, and it was great to have the conversation. And you were coming back at me with all of this great stuff that you use in your practice, you use with your students, and you had sort of strategies and advice around that, and was shooting off all these new neural pathways in my mind. And I thought, oh, this is such a good conversation. I want to re-engage and have this conversation again. And the reason why I think this is so important is through my own experience and experiences of others that I talk with. When we are catapulted from our studies, the community that we have, our teachers, our fellow students, we're sort of slungshot out there into the world and we are alone. And I think this can be a place where people can have anxiety, they can flounder, maybe fall away. And because there can be a sense of what direction do I take? How do I move my work forward? How do I go deeper into it? How do I do this alone? And so I wanted to have this conversation around this area to maybe help people spark some ideas for them, for us to have a good conversation too. So this is just setting the scene from where this conversation is coming from. It is a little bit long-winded, I know, but I wanted to start with this question to you, is that you completed your studies in the mid-1970s at RMIT here in Melbourne. For those of you that don't know, that's Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. And I wanted to ask you, number one, when you were let loose into the world, how did you determine what you wanted to make? And how did you determine if it was good enough?
Good questions, Amy. I have to take you back further because letting loose at RMIT, yes, it was a 3-year course, but I actually had been doing it for a number of years. I had a choice between Latin, German, or pottery when I was 12, and I'd failed the others, so I was doing pottery. So in those years, through high school, I had been to many exhibitions. I had a great teacher who took me, I still remember, I could about lay out the show now, if you gave me the work, to a retrospective of Harold Ewan. He was the first artist to be given a retrospective at the National Gallery of Victoria, and it was a ceramist. So I was then probably 16 to go into that and see that work, a life of a person laid out, and to see the development of that work over a period of time. It excited me, but it also daunted me. But it excited me because I could see elements that I responded to, like glazes. I love platters. He was the one. I do a lot of platters, and I'd have to say that was the person who inspired me with, doing platters like a canvas. Glaze-wise, I had met Reg Preston, who was an amazing glaze person, and that inspired me there. So by the time I'd left RMIT, I was sort of fairly well knew where I wanted to go. I hadn't just come in and had 3 years. I'd really had more or less 9 years, 10 years. So it's a cumulative thing. And I think the hardest thing for anyone when leaving a course is that first, 12 months to 2 years, because you don't have the support of the college, you don't have support of your colleagues and materials and equipment. You're left afloat on a little raft, maybe a big raft or a little raft, and it gets a bit daunting. But when I left, I knew I wanted to, one, be a potter, two, I wanted to explore more, my work with glaze. I quickly also decided, and this is a very early decision, I admire people who make domestic work, and I did make bowls, vases, and lidded pots, but I didn't make a range and sort of set it up. I wanted to do pieces that inspired me, that pushed me all the time. And it's a fine line. But what I did to do that, to develop, was that in those days we had community arts centres. There's a few coming back, but in the 70s it was huge around Australia. There was an actual board of the Australia Council of Community Art Board. And I remember teaching at Melbourne Uni in their art class thing they had, Footscray Community Arts Centre, Sunshine Community Arts Centre, and they 2 days a week gave me my finances to allow me to make my work. So instead of relying initially on that, I had sort of funding, if you like. I created that. It also got me out of the studio, and I do enjoy teaching. It's always been part of my profession, but it hasn't been my center of it. So in leaving RMIT, in my head, I knew where I wanted to go. And it was after a few years, I then said, right, it's exhibitions. And why I said that is because I'm basically lazy.
I doubt that.
I know when people laugh at me when I said that. But what it did was it gave me a deadline. It gave me a point of focus. And so I started, it was actually Potter's Cottage, good old Potter's Cottage. So much came out of that institution many years ago in Warrandyte in Melbourne. But giving an exhibition, and it was Reg Preston who was on the ownership of that, who said, I think you should have a show. And I started on exhibitions. Now, exhibitions gave me a deadline. It gave me a point. I had to resolve things. So I'd work up, work towards a show. And that's why I've had 105. It keeps me working that way. I can't sit down and just make work for the work's sake and let it pile up and say, I have a show, because I think about an idea and that idea develops. And usually at the end of an exhibition, things are happening that are the seed for the next show. So I don't have to reinvent myself, or I never reproduce the work. There are elements that tie into the next one. So you're on a roll, if you like. It helps me to keep going. So yeah, I don't know if that's answering fully that question. I know there was 2 parts to it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, yeah, a lot of the artists that I work with, the deadline is so crucial. And it freaks people out. I had a hard to say, it freaks people out, but it makes them deliver something.
It takes you to a different level. I mean, people, I see, trying to explain to students, you don't say, oh, I've got to this. You actually have to plan it. So here's my deadline for an exhibition. The work has to be finished maybe 2 weeks before, because it has to be delivered a week before, probably 10 days before that, because the work has to be photographed and catalogued. And then here's my last glaze firing. Here's the last bit. So you work that way. People compress into a point where you actually have to plan back and know when your last making day is. Then you just get on and start making. And every show, I'm like at sea. I have not quite got the handle on it. And as I make, things evolve. So I couldn't go back and make a show. Oh, I know what happened and everything in that show, but that moment in time, there are these things happening. And I might be learning to fire a kiln slightly differently. You know, for my luster firings, 10 seconds or 5-10 degrees will make a difference, or how I apply something or whatever. You know, they're the things I am focused so much onto at that moment, and they're evolving. And then they'll be taken up and have to be learned that a different evolution, not quite different evolution, but challenges again. It's putting yourself on the edge all the time.
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah. And that's when the things happen. I always equate it to a show like you're going down a lovely river, canoeing, thinking about all these nice things I'm going to do. The river gets tighter and tighter as the show gets, and then you're going to go through rapids, and it's this intensity that you have to concentrate and be there at the moment. That's why, and then you through it and into the next nice quiet patch of water. And that's the thing that is very difficult sometimes for others around you to understand, that you literally are in your bubble working. It's a mind thing. And people say to me, oh, do you ever think about ceramics when you're not making? I said, I never not think about it. I mean, it's a look of light. I'm looking out of my lovely window and seeing a certain cloud pattern at the moment. Yesterday, there were about 8 planes going over, and I had all these jet lines, which I haven't seen for ages. Or it might be the last moment of the sun going down. Just anything. It's all there. It's an osmosis effect that you acquire things, and it's then what you do with them is up to you. Yeah.
Do you find with an exhibition, I've had this experience where you deliver it and it just feels like you're getting started on something. Like it's I think this is a universal thing, but it's really exciting. It's not that this exhibition has to be this perfect, complete, finished body of work, but it's this part of the process, and it just generates so much ideas. And what do you think about that?
Exactly. And that's what I mean by taking that in, you know, when you think I'm ready to go for another show, that's where you are. That's going to take you to the next show.
Yeah.
And the next body of work. I always say to students or people, when you admire somebody's work and you love it, go back and see how far can you track it back. And you see this evolution. And sometimes if you see one person's work here and then 10 years later it's this, or 5 years later, and it doesn't make sense. But if you see it constantly, you can see where that change has happened. And that,
because things happen gradually, don't they? Especially in ceramics. I mean, the shifts are very small, and sometimes it can seem like there's not much is happening for you, not much is happening for other artists out there. But when you do see it, you step back and you see it, you can see the evolution.
It's interesting. I remember at a point where I had been working in oxidization for 6 years, 7 years with my glazes and my surfaces, and I went, I'm missing reduction. And I literally changed everything of it. That the next day I went, right, I'm pulling back and redeveloping those some ones. And the first show after that was called simply Reds, or Reds and Reds, or so. And it was all about copper reds and temakus and chung glazes again. And people would have gone, where in the hell's that come from? Because I changed the forms for those glazes. But in my head, I was linking back to something 10, 12 years before that I wanted to come back to. And I keep saying, oh, I want to go back to saturated, or play with saturated iron glazes again. And people go, that's nothing to do with luster. No, but in before me is like my banquet of work that I can pull so many things back. And I don't limit myself. That's the important thing. I don't limit myself. I only do luster. I happen to be at the moment doing luster at the moment, or luster glazes, but already I'm thinking of something else I want to do with that. And I don't have, for once, don't have a show lined up for a while or at all, because I want space. When I've got to reorganize my stuff, my collections of others and everything else, and I need time for that. But also, I want to have a play with these little things that have been ticking in my head probably for a year, 2 years.
Yeah, we do. So yeah, we do revisit these past things that we have done. And for you, because I know you keep a good collection of your own work, so you actually have that as a resource. But do you take notes? Do you journal? Do you draw? I know you do a lot of photography.
I have to say, I do not take notes and I do not journal.
There you go.
I'm dreading the day if I get, if I have amnesia or something. I took someone into my container. I've got a 40-foot container. Half of it, it's a collection of other people's work. I've got about 900 pieces of other people's work. And why do I have that many? Because I like pieces. I don't have people, because I do luster, doesn't mean I don't appreciate and like wood-fired pieces or fine bone china or whatever, hand-built pieces. I'm a thrower. I love them. And I took someone in to show them things, and they picked up a bowl, and there was a stack of bowls about that big, pieces that come out of the kiln. Oh, I like that, I'll keep it. And I picked it up and they said, when's that from? And I said, well, that was from about, that was about 83, 84. And it had this because, and they said, you remember all that? And I go, yes, point me a piece and I'll tell you the story about it all. Because if it were like, they're my sketches, they're my notes are in those pieces. And that's my I'm going to indulge this year and going back over all those things. So it'd be interesting to see what they influence me in the future. Yeah.
And it's a really good sort of note for people who are, coming up the stages of ceramics, art, any art or craft actually. I hope what we're discussing is very applicable to all sorts of mediums, but is to keep some of your work in some way, and don't release it too quickly before you've had a chance to be with it, experience it, understand what it's telling you. To do that, not be in such a rush, because you lose a lot of good information.
You are so right. I think people, I have to say, I'm frightened by how much people just make work and get it out there, and they don't actually feel it. 2 or 3 things on that. Ken Hood, who was the Deputy Director of the National Gallery of Victoria years ago and Decorative Arts Curator, bought 2 of my pieces that I wanted to keep in a show that I put a higher price on, just after I was a student. And I said, I wanted though to keep those. He said, so you should have. And he said, probably the most important thing to me at that time, and it's always been with me, is the artist should have the best collection of their work. So from then on, I kept pieces that came back from shows that I thought were quite special, I would keep. And I jokingly say, if the piece stays too long in my studio, it will never leave it. And people say, oh, that was old work, No, old work is just as important as now work, because what you were doing at that time was then now. And sometimes you can't go back to those places. There are pieces, when you're doing work, there are always better pieces than others, and you have to identify those. Now, we'll get to that in a second. But also living with the pieces, it helps you understand where you need to take something, or what is working, what isn't, and that. Alan Cager-Smith had a technique. We talked about this years ago. He's an English ceramist who made luster, beautiful pigment luster. He said if he didn't understand a piece, he would put it on a stool by his bed. So it was the first thing he saw when he woke up. So you're not intellectualizing something, you're not emotionally in this, you're just looking at it. And he said, pieces that I wasn't sure about, it helped me resolve or decide which way. Was it something special? I've known people, you have these expectations of work coming out, and it comes out nothing like it. Oh, it's a lot of crap. Let's give it, and you give it to somebody, and you give it to somebody, and you go to their place and go, where did you get that? You're projecting an idea how that should have come out, not what it was. And you need to sit and live with them. I always say to students, if you're doing glaze tests, put them in front of your windowsill, or where you're washing up or doing things, so you're continually looking at them. And it's this observing. Now, probably we talk about this, and there might be a good point to read. It's from Yanagi, the Unknown Craftsman. There's a chapter called Seeing and Knowing, and it's just the last bit. And because the hardest thing is to criticize your work, to judge it, because sometimes you think, oh, it didn't work, and you throw it out. Other times you think, oh, everything I do is marvelous, and people tell you it's marvelous. Don't listen to too many people, really. You've got to feel it in you what is right. And you have to be, it's the old, hold on, we're getting to a whole bit what this is about. It's how to look at something. Now, before we read this, I'll read you two things here. If you go, I suggest to everyone, see as many ceramic pieces as you like, even pieces, style of work you don't like, because it's going to tell you something. I had a project, I had a little thing with students. They all had to send me 2 images of work they disliked immensely, and 2 images of work they liked. And then I put them all into a PowerPoint and mixed them all up. So nobody knew anything. So we looked at them without making comment. Then we looked at them and talked about each piece. And then I said, okay, let's see which ones we like. And it was, by the time people had talked about the ones they disliked for the wrong reason, maybe color, or it was not their style. There's 2 things I always say. When you go and see an exhibition or work, or it could be anything, there's 2 things a piece will do to you. You'll go, wow, isn't that incredible? Whoa, that'll never do that again to you. It's given all itself in one hit. It'll never have that impact. Then what I say, the other one is the R effect. Oh, and you keep coming back to it, and you can see a piece many times. It builds. It's that, oh, it's really connecting to you. The wow effect hits you over the head, and here I am, flamboyant, I'm everything. It could be, it doesn't matter what it is, but it'll never do that again to you. So always be wary on that. This is the thing, as I was saying, from Yanagi. And his way, he was leading up to it about how to look at something. And this is his suggestion. First, put aside the desire to judge immediately. Acquire the habit of just looking. Second, do not treat the object as an object for the intellect. Third, just be ready to receive passively without interposing yourself. If you can void your mind of all intellectualization, like a clear mind that simply reflects, all the better. This non-conceptualization, this Zen state of no mind, may seem to represent a negative attitude, but from it springs the true ability to contact things directly and positively. Because we constantly react. Is this, how you react to it? Sit back. When I look at something for the first time, I don't look at it. I look at the space around it, how it occupies that space. I'm looking at the negative space around the object, be it a mug, be it a piece of sculpture. Then I look at, it's like an onion. You have to peel those things back. Then I say, what's my eye doing? How's it moving around the form? Is it being taken around by decoration? How does the decoration, if it's got decoration, work with the form? How am I responding to the color? So they're all these not hard questions, but they're just layers I'm looking at to see how that piece works for me. You showed me a piece of Kurt, and it's over here. And I'm only seeing the silhouette, as people can see, but you brought it up. And there was so many more things, the wood fire from one side, the lines you put into it, the throwing bits, you know, it became quite complex and lovely. And it's something that you could just turn and see and want to touch.
Mm.
A little thing on touch, we're sidetracking totally here. I was involved with the Craft Council of Victoria, well, back in the 80s, and it was the day of bumper stickers. And we were thinking of a bumper sticker for the Crafts Council. And I said, craft is the art you use. And I like that because you don't run your hand over it. If you put a tapestry and a painting on a wall, nobody touches the painting, but they'll go and touch the tapestry. We picked this up, a mug, a drinking vessel. It's the most intimate thing you have in your life most of the time. You pick it up, you hold it, you drink from it, your lip content touching the rim. And you do that 30, 50, 100 times a day. And you do that unconsciously. I mean, this one's a Ian Jones wood-fired one, salt glazed wood-fired. And I love that. I have a whole bench of mugs of other people's. You know, I enjoy them for different things. And I love Ian's handles. My fingers fit on there. Love, you know, there's a nice balance. So when you're touching things and picking objects up, how do they feel to you? These are all the sensory things as well as the visual. You have to take into account, you know, the sense. That's what I'm looking for.
Sensory.
Say the touch of it all. So it's looking at things and just quietly sitting. It's not meditative. It's just quietly sitting and looking at something. My eyes are going to a whole range of things here. And then you suddenly see patterns. Maybe I'm looking at whole plugs with power, all things for different computers and that sitting there. There's a nice pattern and arrangement sitting there. So you can look there. I remember doing a workshop recently at a place, and we're talking about looking and seeing and, you know, drawing things from around you. And during the lunch break, I went around and photographed within the workshop and just outside. And then I presented them and I said, are any of you getting any of this? Oh, they're lovely. I said, they're all around you. That's what I saw at lunchtime. This is that bit over that, the corner of that room. That's the brickwork outside. So it's there. And it's just those osmosis effect of taking it in. And jumping back to the making, when you're making, well, when I'm throwing, for instance, I have a light behind me of the pot, a very low wattage. So I'm actually looking at the space when I'm throwing a vase. So I'm conscious of that, the form of the piece, and the same with the shadow cast across in a bowl or a platter. It's being aware of that. So when you're making, it's helping you to refine and make better work as such. I was talking to Jeff Mitchum. He was just got a show opening at Savia. And a few weeks ago, he was on his one of the last pieces. He said, it's taking me half the day to get resolved the last inch of the pot. He said, I had an idea where it was going, but it didn't work. So I played with it for half a day, not constantly, but just doing something, walking away from it and coming back and seeing that reaction. And he said, I'm really excited now. I can see what I wanted. And it's that fact of looking.
Yeah, and it makes me, we were just talking about before, but we started recording, is I was telling you about this passage by Annie Alber's Material as Metaphor, and I was using it with the group earlier in the week, and she's writing about listening to our material, not dominating it, and actually to be passive, and to be active is to be passive. And, you know, as someone you're always, seems to me, you know, got deadlines, got things going on. How do you take the time to stop the doing and to be quiet and actually look at your work? How do you approach that?
Good question. And I really think that was a great passage. Taking one step back on that is that when people begin ceramics or anything, they're overshadowing it. They don't take time to understand their materials. They don't take time to understand process, everything else. Okay, I equate it to driving a car. We'll have to go back to a gear car with a gear stick. You know, you learn in, put in the clutch, put in the first gear, bring up the rev, slowly bring out the clutch. Oh shit, there's a car coming. I have to put an indicator on. And it all becomes a bit much, and you're in there at each stage. Now you drive and you do all those things without even thinking. It all becomes so natural, and it's part of you. And that's where what happened years ago. It's so much part of you with the materials. You have to have you can have a change in a material, and you have to relearn it again. You know, we had changes in feldspar, Australian feldspar no longer, now it's all from India. I've had frit changes. So it pulls you up, and you have to learn them and be with them again. And it's a bit like kilns. I'm stunned, well, not stunned. Years ago in workshops, nearly everyone had a kiln. Hardly anyone has a kiln when I do glaze workshops. And I wonder, would you go to a cooking workshop, a cooking class, and go home without an oven or anything to do it? But let's go back to the kiln. That kiln does everything for you. That's the thing that transforms it from one state into another. And even electric, where people say, oh, I press the button and all does that. You can fire it at a different rate. You'll change the glaze. So you've got to be at one and understand it. I don't have as many now, but I had about 12 kilns at one stage, and they all fired different. Now I've got gas kilns on one side, and I had two big gas kilns, and they're about 40 cubic each. And if I hadn't fired one for a few months, it took me firing just to retune myself to that kiln. And they need little tuning. You have to be tuned into them. And I could change them. Well, I'd just change the damper by about half an inch. I go from oxidation to reduction. The other kiln was just turning a half a turn on the gas pressure. I was that finely tuned with those kilns. And it was something I used to get students to do, is to learn how to tune a kiln and how to reduce, and just subtle, little movements. And then observe, wait for the kiln to rebalance itself. And it's this game with materials, with the making, with the kilns. I'm quite comfortable. They are me. I'm an extension, they're an extension of me in a way, and vice versa. So when people beginning, they're totally unaware of all those things. They just want to make, it's exciting, totally exciting. And they want to get it out there. But sometimes you've got to say, if you're going to move on, you've got to say, do I really know how to do this? People say, oh, I don't make glazes because I don't understand them. There was well, you're only going to get that certain bit. The work will only go to a certain distance. To find it. Now, Peter Travis, I remember in the first conference, the national conference here in Australia, many years ago, and I always remembered him saying, never follow a trend. You've got to create the trend. If you make what everyone else is making, how do you stand out, and why should everyone bother about you? I went into I was doing workshops in Canada a few years ago, and they had a lovely gallery next to the Potters Group, it was there. And this work was sound. And I said to him, you may not like what I'm about to tell you, but I don't know whose work it is in that room. I said, you're all using the same glazes you all use. Here's the 10 glazes. They're all on that work, and I have no idea whose work it is. So for any of you to start standing out, you've got to take control. You've got to say, what do I want? What do I want in glaze or surface or form? And the only way to do that is go and have a look at other stuff to see what gels with you. I was very lucky at RMIT. The other end of Swanston Street was the National Gallery of Victoria. I used to hop on trams and go down for lunch and have lunch down there and walk around. And in those days, a good third of the place was ceramics. Downstairs was all Asian, and it was all Asian ceramics and sawware and everything. And then you go up and there were English, early English, Spanish, you name it. And to take it in and to see it was just like, wow. You know, somebody said to me, oh, people I find just want to see what's doing now. Have a look at what has been. It's so much more important.
And in all sorts of mediums too. I mean, you're talking about ceramics, but you know, all sorts of mediums. You know, maybe remove yourself, if you're a ceramic person, remove yourself from looking at ceramics, looking at pots, and look elsewhere. But I do want to just touch on one thing you mentioned earlier. Is you said it's difficult for people to progress without having their own kiln, but the reality is that many people can't get their own kiln for a while. So when they're in this intermediary place, well, what do you suggest how they can continue to develop their work where they don't have that control yet? They're using other people's kilns or a firing surface. What can they do in that time?
Good question. I'm trying to think of multiple possibilities with that. One would be to go and befriend the person who fires the kiln, so you'd be part of the process. And I made a suggestion to a group that I said, how do you operate? You know, it was a group. And I said, how do people fire here? And they said, oh, such and such, you know, they're not their names, but Mavis and John and Mary are the firing. And I said, who helps them? And I said to them, how do you go? And they said, oh, all this time I said, why don't you make a rule that any new member has to do 8 firings with you that help learn, pass on your knowledge and understanding of the process, because that box in the kiln, that grey box, is a mystery. They see it one day, and the next few days later it's come out and it's glossy and it's doing this. So engage as much as you can. I would sure do glaze tests or try things, but give them to maybe 2 or 3 people, or see if there's continuity there. You know, there are things, if you didn't know, if it was, let's say, oxidized earthenware mid-fire, doesn't matter. Yeah, that gives a bit more stability there. When you get your own kiln, you can find that maybe if you slightly slow cool something, or like for instance, we don't see tea dust anymore because the kilns cool too quickly. I saw some the other week and I went, oh, it's so nice. And I bet you've got a brick kiln. They went, yeah. The kiln cooled quickly. So it's understanding, but be ready to help people. There was someone saying wanting to do wood firing. I said, well, Strathland in Canberra, every month or so, they have a sort of community wood firing. Go and help. Engage in that. And last few workshops, I've been showing them how to build a little fiber kiln. They're probably under $1,000, and it fires beautifully, and you can build it in one morning.
Yeah, there are many options to be creative, isn't it? I'm working with an artist where she has a bit of land and she's just experimenting with the kiln in the ground as well, with some of her family members, and it's just really exciting and adventurous and learning so much through the process. I think what you're sort of saying there is, don't remain solo, don't be an island, reach out to people and trade your time and your skills, and even form a small group, people that are interested in glazes and looking at glaze issues and glaze challenges. Another question I had on my list is this question of style, like developing a style or a way of working. And I often get asked, maybe you have been asked this too, how did you develop your style? How did you get there? And I'm always a little bit flummoxed, and what do you mean? Because this isn't something that I consciously thought of. What do you think about this? Did you get this question?
You asked me that the other week, and I thought, I don't consciously think of it. And I think that's the thing. People are too early in their making start to be concerned. It's like saying, I'm playing a piano, I'm learning a guitar, and has my stuff, I've got 2 or 3 tunes under my belt, but I want to play like John Williams or, who's the word who died at 27. I forget his name. You've got to do it. Keep making.
Yeah.
The more you make, the better you'll get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too many people are not making enough before they start selling.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say it, sorry, everyone, but, I'd suggest that if you want to go and listen to something, Prue Venables has got an interesting interview on the Australian Design Centre website and under their podcast, and Prue was the Living Treasures, and all the Living Treasures, they've been doing talks about it. And Prue says that when she was studying in England, the students were not allowed to sell their work, and we used to have that at ANU, and a new head of school came along and the students said, oh, we need to sell, and it was broken. And I think that's wrong, because they're not, it's everything, the department is making their work with them, because they've got the support of their colleagues, their peer support, the equipment, the lecturers, everything else. But that's beside the point. You can argue left, right and centre on that. But Prue then went on to say she didn't sell for another 3 to 5 years. She didn't feel her standard was up there. Now, what standard? That's a whole thing in itself, and everyone's got a different idea on that. You've just got to make, and the better you make. And don't fire everything, line them all up. I always used to say to people, make a whole 4 boards, all the pots. Don't decide that day, but the next day you come in with fresh eyes because you're tired that day. Okay, I'm only keeping 2 out of 20. Vic Greenaway, I remember saying his little throne bowls that had beautiful distortion, sharp distortions in there. Oh, they're beautiful. They had a dance of their own. And he said if he threw 70, he kept 20. Because he learned to identify which ones worked and that. Not every piece is going to work. And and you have to learn a bit of standardize, keeping the standards up there.
Well, that's the question. How do you know what the standard is? How do you know what your standard is?
Look, you've just got to look. Some days you'll be hard on yourself, and some days you go, well, everything I'm making is bloody brilliant. That's when you've got to live with the work for a little while and then decide. It's interesting. I'll sit show for it's just finished now down at Sabia. I had more work than I put in, and I lined them up on my bench. I've got 2 very long benches. Together they're 6 meters long, and I put them out there, and I had them sitting there every day, and I walked, they'd been developed as they came as a kiln. I'd put them there and I'd move them around, and I go, right, that's in. No, that isn't going to work. That's not quite there yet. And I'll put it aside. So I'm actually comparing the works with each other. I'm seeing which one has got that little spark, that's something extra. And there's one I couldn't decide, and I'm keeping it because there's things happening on there I can see for the future. It's not fully cooked, that term, but it's not just there, but I can see possibilities where it could go.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to share some images of your work, and as I do that, I want to ask you about this thing that I've heard you often say, is that when you make a piece, every piece is a test. So often I hear people say, I need to get to the point where I know how it's going to come out. I've got to do all my testing so I know exactly how it's going to come out. But you say, every piece is a test, but every piece is a test, but every piece can be the finished work too. So as I share the images here, if you'd like to talk a bit about that, because I think it's very interesting.
Okay, it's something right from the beginning when I made stuff. My mind is ticking away. So I think when I've got my pots as best lined up. I'm actually drawing on with a pencil. So I'm not starting with a plain empty canvas. I've got ideas sticking away. So there's always pencil there, and I'm going past the piece, I'll sketch on something. I don't necessarily have to do it. But when I'm working on the piece, I'm in that moment working on it, and things tick away, and I'll trust my instinct to do that, to actually take it that extra step to what I thought, or totally do something entirely different. What Amy, you said, where people work through their ideas perfectly, and yes, to me, the work can become very stillborn. They can be nice pieces, but they don't have that extra spark that I'm making, that extra life. And it's living on the edge is dangerous. And that's the danger that I like. Not everyone's going to work. This yellow one is really exciting. It came out of a little bowl. I was doing something. I thought, oh, what about if I just reverse that? And I saw it, and that was the spark that led to this one here. So it's, if you're doing domestic wear, and I have no qualms about it. It's so lovely to see so much tableware being made now, and eating off tableware. That is fantastic. Now, they need to have it all working, so they've got a set. But if I did tableware, no two would be the same, because I might have a theme running through. It might be a variable of color, of tones running through each piece, so they can mix and match. So I wouldn't be following that idea. But yeah, I just treat each piece as an individual. And that's the thing that I look at. Every piece is an individual for me. And I try to make that piece live as much as I can. There's a quote, I don't know if I can remember, from the Tao of Pooh: to know the way we go, the way the things we do. It's all in front of you. But if you try too hard to see it, you'll just become confused. I am me and you are you, as you can see. But when you do the things that you can do, you will find the way, and the way will follow you. And I think that's it. We don't trust ourselves enough to follow things.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, and because it's scary. Your people want to know the outcome. But the great stuff happens when you don't know, and you discover these things that you never thought you could make. I mean, imagine if you looked back at, revisit when you're in 1970, throwing your graduation cap in the air at RMIT, would you ever thought you'd be making the work that you make now?
No, but I knew I'd be making. I think that's a big difference. I've seen so many people who don't make, who had possibilities and they threw it in. It's not easy. You've got to believe in it, and also you've got to be passionate about it, and you've got to be passionate by quite a bit, because there'll be things thrown at you don't like, but it's the thing that drives me, really.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, I'll be intrigued to see what I do in the next few years.
Yeah.
You mentioned about A&U. I remember going for a review, and they asked me what my 3-year plan and research was. And I said, I'm finishing next year. And they said, why? I said, because I want to be physically strong enough and in a condition to go home and make some really, my next important bodies of work. I enjoyed the teaching interaction, but the making for me is the most important.
Yeah, excellent. Well, maybe we could go on and on, hey, but maybe we should tail off there. But oh no, wait, just one little thing before we do is, you mentioned you use defects to give effects. You mentioned that to me. The defect, like you can change a defect. What is a defect?
A defect. Oh, right, defect. Oh, yeah. I mean, God, and when you see me put glazes on. Oh, if you go to Australian Design Centre, and under touring shows, I'm in one called Obsession to Make. And there's a little video, and the whole process is there. I mean, I get 4-inch paintbrushes and slap on glaze, and then spray into that. So when you're told a glaze has to be evenly coated on, oh, you're only going to get dead stuff. I'm playing with things. So if you can get a defect and make it work for you, you've got your effect. You've got something nobody else has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes back to really being aware of what is in front of you, doesn't it? And not just overlooking that, oh, it's not what they say it's meant to be, throw it in the bin, but really be open to what the material is giving you.
Yeah, I mean, all through, even throwing or something, playing with things. The other thing I always used to say to students, don't be afraid to play. Take yourself and try things. They may not work, but it'll take you somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Someone said to me the other day, if you're not playing, you're not really doing it right, or something like that. If you're not playing, you're not doing it right. Yeah.
It's one big indulgence for me. I just love it
all. Yeah. Oh, it's been such a good conversation, Greg. Thank you so much. And before we flip off, I want to let people know where they can find you and go deeper into your work, because I just shared a little bit here. But your website is gregdaly.com.au. Your Instagram is at Greg Daly Ceramics. Now I'm going to put all these in the.
No, I think it's Greg Daly. I think it is.
Oh, sorry.
I may be wrong, but yeah.
I checked last night.
Well, whatever it was last night, I have to say my website's pretty lousy. I haven't had it updated for a few years. So, I'd definitely be going to, for instance, Skepsy Gallery, because they've got my last show there, and to Sabia, and to Nancy Sebo Gallery in Canberra. They've all got all the last shows up.
Yeah, great. And I'll pop all those links in the show notes, and your books. So I've got two of them. I've got to get the other one, but these are two that you've got: Developing Glazes and Luster, and the other one is Glazes and Glazing Techniques, which I think is
it's out of print. Been out of print for eBay's a good one to watch for that. AB Books is a great place to go for looking old books, but it's hard to get. I saw on Amazon it was for $200, but don't go there. It's more application. There's developing glazes and application of glazes, but also help me out. There is a 45-minute on glaze application of all different styles on the ceramic. You're on it too.
Okay.
Ceramic School. I want to say Ceramic School. It's not.
Oh yeah, the Ceramics Congress.
Ceramics Congress.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll add that in too. Yeah, that was fabulous.
Has a 45. Has a whole thing on that.
Great.
On glazed application.
Yeah. And you can get these books if you're interested, people. Book Depository is probably the best place to get them. And you'll be speaking at the 16th Australian Ceramics Triennale in Alice Springs in July about materials. So that's your next.
I'm on a panel about materials, people exploring materials in different ways. And I'm also presenting a paper on alchemy of luster, because one of the sub-themes is alchemy. Yeah. I think that's about it. I think, was there anything else? No, I think that's about it.
Yeah, and delving into new work.
Yeah, I'm making a pact with myself that because I'm moving, emptying shelves and doing things and that, I'm going to make a point that I actually throw one. I see people say to me, how often do I make? Am I making all the time? No, I'd probably only throw 20 days in a year.
Yeah.
I've got 2 shows. That's plenty. And then you're making in time. So I need to just to keep my, more for physicality, to keep myself on the stronger side. I want to do some last one. Ian Jones and I many years ago decided that what we needed to do was just make lots of big platters or something and bisque them and have them sitting there. Because I used to make meter-sized platters, that's with 40 kilos of clay. I think I tore a ligament in my arm, so I won't be able to get that size anymore. But I thought, if I make more like that and just literally put them aside as canvases for the future, but
Yeah.
I don't know, I probably won't do it. I'm lazy.
I don't know about that. I just wanted to say also, when you're talking about, what was it, Alan Kager Smith that said, pop the pot near the bed. And I remember you told me about that, and I did it. I did it with 2 sculptural pieces I had, and it was amazing at the end of the bed on the table. And what was good too was the different times of day the light would come in.
Right.
And then also, as I walk past the bedroom, I just catch a glimpse of it when I wasn't, meant to. And it just made me see it in a different way too. So I think these things of stepping back from your work and seeing it in these different ways, that's a really good technique that maybe people can use out there.
Well, here's another thing to challenge people. Every firing you have, line the pieces up and sit there and say, which one am I going to keep? And put it aside. So it's also making you look at each piece to see which has a spark or something that you're responding to more than another. And then the hard question is, why don't you feel the same way about the others?
Yes, it's going deeper, isn't it? Often we'll say, interrogate it, what's working well and what's not working well, instead of, I like it, it's great, it's not so great. Why is it telling you that? Because that's such good information to take onto the next pieces that you're making. Okay.
Yeah, each piece has a positive and negative in it. You just have to understand both.
Takes time, attention, focus.
And just go and go to museums, go to exhibitions. Say, which one would you take? Which is the one that I really want? And why don't I like that one? And challenge yourself, why don't I like it?
Yeah, and not just exhibitions and museums, like the world of that studio that you were in, the bricks, the light, the leaf, what's happening there. It's all around.
The general public can come in and say, oh, I like that pot, and I don't like that pot, I'll buy that one. You are the maker. You have to understand why more deeply. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes, just keep reading that one of from their own craftsman, that quote. Just sit back and quietly look at something.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thank you for watching this recording. We'll look forward to seeing you soon, maybe another conversation sometime soon. Thank you so much. Bye for now.